Hello Internet, this is Kopitiam Council, and today if you're wondering why do we look so nice, I mean my jacket and around me, it's because we are doing it at this proper studio. And Adi, as always, listeners, I'm Haffisz.
And as usual, he's with me, Adi. And yeah, today we are kind of having this very special episode. Not only because that we're dressed quite nice for the occasion, but because we finally have something a bit more substantive in terms of video and audio quality. We're no longer confined anymore to our webcams in our bloody kitchens and bedrooms. And that's all thanks to where we are right now. So Haffisz, where are we right now?
And also doesn't mean that our content will be less substantive. So what we're doing right now is something experimental, if you will. And we are so excited with this. This is another milestone that we hitting with Kopitiam Council, and we hope that this will bring satisfaction to all of you out there. All right.
But first, I think we need to tell them where we are right now.
Yes, we are at KL Podcast Studio. You've been heard this many podcasts using the same studio, this glorious studio. So we said to Adi, like, hey, why not? We try for an episode. And if you guys liked it, please comment down below and like on this channel and tell us what you think about it.
Yeah, so if we see that it could be a positive growth in terms of direction where we want to go, then who knows, we'll try to incorporate things such as this, because we do have to come to KL for this to actually have this kind of content. But it's very exciting to actually try something like this. Who knows? Okay. Maybe we can also have something in the works for Kopitiam Council, something like this instead of just the standard format. But regardless, I think that we can get some housekeeping out of the way. Yeah. So I think we can just proceed with a regular episode as usual.
Yes, Adi. What's cooking in Malaysia this last 5 days or week? So
I think we've already covered Parliament in the last episode. So I think we're going to shift towards something that the government is actually trying to attempt to do. Firstly, we have, as the time of this recording, just concluded the Congress Economy Bumiputera 2024. This is the first Congress Economy Bumiputera that has been hosted by Prime Minister Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim. Usually the KEBs are huge milestones in terms of government initiatives and programs. Usually this is what sets the tone for the next 5 to 10 years of what kind of planning the government's going to take in terms of Bumiputera planning, what kind of schemes and programs that will be taken to uplift social capital for the Bumiputeras all across Malaysia. And it has just been concluded. If any of you haven't heard why is it important, we can look back to when it was first established in 1965 and 1968. That is where we actually got Majlis Amanah Rakyat, which is MARA, that we know today, which helps all kinds of welfare programs for Bumiputera all across Malaysia. So it's a very huge thing. But, not all KEBs are the same. I think this KEB has quite a lot to, a lot to be desired. But Haffisz?
I think I want to throw one question just to open up our conversation here. It's been about 60 years since the inception, and has it worked, Adi? That's the biggest title that we're gonna have. Has the new economic model or anything under the Bumiputera initiative, has any of it worked? Numbers suggest that it's not. Like the ownership of businesses, like 1 in every 100 is Bumiputera, the others are non-Bumiputera. So we talk about economy, a lot of incentive here and there. MARA, for example, did a lot of things for the Felda folks or the rural folks to get out of the poverty, but is it enough? What do you think, Adi?
I think it really depends who you ask for who benefits from these Bumiputera initiatives. I think it really came into fruition in the 90s or in the 80s when Mahathir Mohamad was still the Prime Minister. He had a huge iron will goal to make sure that Bumiputera takes more of the market share in Malaysia as a whole. And that is how we saw the uprising of the modern Malay, the new Malay, the middle-class Malays that was struggling to be realized back in the 60s and 70s. So in that kind of context, you could say it has made some kind of fulfilled some of its strategic objectives. But when it comes to, it also comes down to who you ask. Some would say that it's made a lot of Bumiputeras very reliant on, it's basically a crutch for them to, it's safety net basically. It's a positive discrimination, some would say, or then we always know what kind of conversations has to be had with positive discrimination kinds of policies, is that when you have that kind of safety net, you don't have that desire to innovate, you don't have that desire to compete. But that is the cornerstone of trying to ensure that you do have that market share, you do own that space. You can show through merit itself that you deserve to be in that market space. But if you have these kinds of policies, you won't really feel the need to innovate. You always know that in the case of failure, or in the case of any hardship, something is always going to pick you back up. And I think we talked about this last episode where limitations really do play a part in how you succeed. Is that once you know what your limitations are, you can kind of charter a more realistic outlook on where you want to go.
As Bumiputera Sabahans, we receive some of those so-called privilege in terms of under the umbrella of Bumiputera. But personally, Adi, I am in the opinion of that any privilege like this in any country, I think, not just restrictive in Malaysia, I mean in the US, in the UK as well, like this is a mentality thing. For me, any assistance without being asked is some sort of like looking down to it. So privileges to Bumiputera, if the right mindset look at it, like you say, like who you ask, right? Like it could be something more of a mockery. Because why would you give an assistant to someone who is capable to do its things? So if Bumiputera out there, any entrepreneur or public figure out there, Bumiputera, that wants to claim that, hey, we did it ourselves without anyone's help. Of course, you're going to get a little bit of help from the banks or for some kind of financial aids. But almost 95% of your is going to be from your own thing. But that's why I said, mentality towards how Bumiputera receive this is sort of like, hey, spoon feeding them with endless vicious cycle. There's no end to this. Like I said, it's been 60 years, and where are we right now? Does it help in terms of making the slice of the cake bigger or the whole cake bigger? Or if it's in the case of the whole cake bigger, who get the most slices? Is it still the Bumiputera? Is it true that all the incentive really helping those poor B40, M40 of Malays? Or is it the friends of political elites that try to hogging all the resources that they have? Every announcement that you ever heard in the last 60 or 40 years is throttled down by the political elite. Those who are in the nose of maybe Prime Minister, the likes of political elites that we have in the past. And one of Prime Minister is being evicted in prison because of one program that based of in investment in Terengganu. So this is not a strange story to Bumiputera or non-Bumiputera in Malaysia, but somehow we sort of like have a conflict, identity conflict with, do we want this to continue? Because again, chicken and egg questions here. Do we need to help the poor, the marginalized of the Malays? But how do we make this more targeted, Adi?
Yeah, it's kind of sound like it. What I'm hearing is that you do make it sound like these initiatives can be quite tone deaf when it comes to uplifting the regular people. It has done great wonders for those are in power to increase their own social capital, they increase their own financial capital as well. Basically, the businessmen, the contractors, the people who are basically in the upper echelons of society. I think when we look at measurements is that I think in the case of, let's say, because you brought up Sabah, right? Mm-hmm. Sabah definitely, it hasn't really done anything for Sabah. I'm sorry to say.
Zero.
I wouldn't say zero, maybe like a 0.1%.
that's zero, Adi.
Yeah. More than zero, I guess. But that's in this kind of context in Sabah, right? Is when we look at the population of Sabah, more than 80% are Bumiputera. And at least 20% are below the poverty line. So in that kind of situation is that what kind of initiatives are helping Bumiputeras in Sabah? Like what can we really say there is an efficient, an efficient delivery of these kinds of schemes compared to when you see in Semenanjung or in Malaya, a lot of these schemes are very out there. It's very easily accessible for people in more concentrated areas in West Malaysia. Sabah, the issue also comes down to, and this is a very old story, a tale as old as time, is the delivery system and infrastructure.
Yep.
We cannot have all these, you can craft all your grand visions and policies and schemes and incentives or whatever. But when you don't have a delivery system that is effective enough to actually channel it to the people that actually do seek to benefit from it, that is where you have that backflow back towards those who already have easy accessibility. So it's kind of like a feedback loop. Is that if it cannot be channeled straight to the on the ground, it'll reroute back. And it'll reroute back to those who are already in the center, who has already benefited. So it becomes this vicious cycle that because of that barrier of distribution. I think that is the core issue here when it comes to any of these Bumiputera policies. Like, okay, Mara, you can give a kind of an exception to that because they set up all kinds of corporate models, corporate ecosystems that can really pinpoint what is needed. But in the Sabahan context, very rare. And that's because infrastructure doesn't allow for that kind of corporate structure or that kind of a delivery system to actually be delivered, to actually be effective and have that kind of efficacy rate that you could see compared to over here in West Malaysia.
Another thing that I would like to comment on like how government employ its resources to make sure that everything that being announced will be translated into, like, I'm not expecting 100%, but at least to the 80s or 70%. Because now that we have PADU underway, I think the targeting will be something much better that currently we have. Because can you imagine, like we talk about MARA initiative here, and MRSM is one of the few that very popular, and time again, we always heard some politicians' cousins or even sons get into MRSM, and we moan about like, hey, it's supposed to be the B40, M40 that came from Felda, came from Kampung to come to the city, and hopefully education will bring a better life in their days. So what happened here? Why do we still hear pengarah of the sons come to the MRSM, and then it's become an issue? And the only few that we heard in social media. How many out there? And Adi, to talk about this, the scale, even they want to abuse MRSM entrance as some sort of like abuse the system. Can you imagine something behind closed door? Something that not open to the public? All the contracts that you mentioned, if 70% needs to be channeled to Bumiputera entrepreneurs in terms of producing halal product, who's the 70% gonna go to? Is it gonna go to maybe some company that related to some ministers?
The 70% goes to the 1%, basically.
Or less, 0.5%, 0.001%. That I would agree with you, because these are the few creme de la creme that we never heard of. Like we heard of Type Mahmud's with its riches, Dam Zainuddin with its riches. But all the regular people that, abusing all these contracts from the government, and that's become a disease, a cancer to our society. Yet when it comes to prosperity of as a race, as a nation, ethnicity, we always blame the others, right? It's always convenient for us. Blame the others. Four fingers pointing at us, but the one finger that we always like to do is pointing to the others.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Exactly, because I think when it comes to any of these initiatives, is that we don't see it on a needs basis. We just put a blanket cover saying that this is for Bumiputera, so it's already exclusive to a particular ethnic group, but it doesn't exactly break it down even more to when it comes to, like you said, B40, M40, or any other kind of income categorization. So there is no needs basis kind of model within this framework. And I think this, like, it goes back to what you said, it's a mentality thing as well from those who are in charge here. Because who are in charge, mostly people who are in the upper echelons, whose riches that cannot be quantified, or who don't even make it on the top list because it's just that, here and there and everywhere. But now this is how we need to actually look back into what these policies are meant to be. They're supposed to uplift people who are struggling. And who are struggling, it cuts across ethnicities. It cuts across any kind of demographic. It just so happens that one particular set of demographics suffer the worst, just in that kind of situation. So you have to rearrange and recontextualize what is it these policies are really meant to do. They definitely serve an interest, yes, but they serve an interest to what end? So that is how I would say, when it comes to formulating these policies. But here's the issue as well, is that when it comes to Bumiputera policies, when it comes to KEB, right, this has always been a political platform. It is always used for political mileage, because when it comes to the voter base, the majority are Bumiputera.
The Malays.
The Malays, Bumiputera, essentially. So you have to find a way to use all these platforms to your advantage. If you're a politician, you would use any kind of situation or platform to boost your political capital. You would find a way to gain more political mileage. And I think KJ mentioned this in Kelas Kejap, is that he was disappointed that PMX did not actually take the opportunity to move the needle to actually gain more Malay support, which he so desperately needs in the upcoming elections.
Ooh, look who's talking. It's KJ again. When he's not in power, he has a lot to say.
He's a lot to say.
When he's in power,
it's true, but fair enough, right? Fair enough. I give credit where credit is due. To an extent, it is true to what he says, right? It's a political platform, but this is quite unique, I think, as well, is what ensured that PMX is not able to turn this into a very galvanized political movement situation, is because this is the first time that non-Bumiputeras are actually involved in the decision-making and policy-making for Bumiputera policies.
Yes.
So what do you think of that, though? Okay, you involve somebody that is not going to be involved in any of your schemes.
I actually welcome that suggestions by the Prime Minister to involve other people, because inclusivity is really important in policy making, right?
Madani,
you know, the Madani concept, and it's aligned with his team. But more than that, just go back to this as a platform to use to garner political support. Like, I think it will come a day where the Malays will have a different mindset, thinking that, hey, why do we still receive this? I'm very capable. We have everything in our disposal, and why should it be any different because of my skin color? So until we have this awakening in the society, Malay psyche, that will say to themselves, like, this is a mockery to myself, to my ethnicity, to my religion, in fact, because this is not being condoned by any religion to be more discriminate in terms of how do you channel your aids or foundation. So what, like you mentioned just now, it cut across ethnicity and religion when it comes to helping the needy. There's a lot of poor Chinese. There's a lot of poor Indian. There's a lot of poor Kadazan and Ibans. Like, why Malay or Bumiputera particularly has to have a congress where Prime Minister single-handedly is mentioning, oh, we're going to announce this certain money allocated for all of you so that you can propel into your own respective industry. How about the others? So I don't believe in the narrative that this is what the Malays need. I think it's in fact the Malays as society need to call out politicians, hey, stop doing this. You just politicize this as a help to us, but we don't need it. We want to compete in free market with the Chinese, with the Indian, so that we can prove to ourselves that we also can do it.
Definitely, it's a capacity, confidence building, and kind of like restoring dignity to, let's say, an entrepreneur who should be able to make it on their own, basically on their own steam, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, that would be the ideal situation. But I think in terms of Malaysia, even other countries still struggle to realize that kind of ambition, especially ones with like huge income disparities. Like, of course, America always touts themselves of having opportunity for everyone, but definitely some of those opportunities are still locked away for particular privileged groups, and they still haven't figured it out. How long until Malaysia figures it out? I think, but it's a good start as well. Is when I ask, because when you bring non-Bumiputeras into this, it kind of increases the variety of solutions that you can have to promote the uplifting of people who really are in need. And if you have people who come from the outside perspective, they can say, hey, these are certain deficiencies that you have that hasn't been working for the past 60 years. Now we're going to give you a different idea. So it's a prosper thy neighbor, and variety is the spice of life kind of allegory I would try to make here. But I think, just so we don't get ahead of ourselves, is what was announced for basically this whole KEB is a lot of schemes to increase agricultural production, to increase land usage for Bumiputera so that they can increase their own financial capital. But when it comes to KEB, is that this is the first stage. which is just the policy, the formulation phases, the strategic phases. What we really want to see is 2 years down the line, once they meet, because usually KAB, they would meet once and then they would meet 2 years later where they would have like the implementation phases. So Zahid Hamidi is heading the steering committee for the KAB, and Rafizi Ramli is heading the technical committee. So I guess you could say that maybe one person is capable in that kind of, in terms of the secretariat and the ones that's overseeing these kinds of things. But yeah, what we're laying out is we're just trying to say that foundationally there is an issue here with these policies. But I think there is a different shift in tone here compared to the previous KABs. The last KAB was like in 2018 and 2019 during Mahathir's second stint as Prime Minister. So that was a bit lackluster. So I want to see something a bit more decisive here. It's like what we mentioned last time, is we want to see a more decisive government this time around.
Yeah. I think when it comes to Bumiputera issue, not even 1 hour, a whole 24 hours is not going to be enough for us to have a run on it. So basically what we have is what our worldview reflecting on how Malaysia and its treatment for the privileged few of the Bumiputeras. I hope KJ and Sharil are listening to this so that they can have more refined view of how, especially for Bumiputera in Sabah and Sarawak as well, Bumiputera of that. So that's it about Bumiputera Congress, Economic Congress recently. And coming up next, we're going to talk about, what are they?
I think we're just going to shift it to more international affairs. So right now, President Biden is working on some kind of ceasefire between Israel and Palestine. A lot of things to be said, so stay tuned for that.
Yes, Hamas and Palestine coming up right up.